Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Awaken the World. We are live on this, Wednesday night at the end of February, February 24th, in the year of our COVID pandemic, 2021. It is 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time if you're on this continent or on this planet. And of course, tonight, we're going to talk about the source of suffering and ending it. So nice to see all of you, of course. Namaste. Allow me to express my love for each and every one of you. You are perfectly okay just as you are. Now, we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about this whole thing about suffering. And the reason why this can be a difficult video for some people, it really depends on how much they're tied to their egoic sense of self. Now, one of the things that Eckhart Tolle talks about that I happen to agree with, okay, is that when we feel belittled, what's actually happening is our ego is shrinking back. It's becoming diminished. And because we live from that egoic state so often, we often feel like we're under attack. And, realistically, this is a very juvenile and unconscious way of perceiving, which doesn't make it wrong. It's all in that evolution, all in that progression of consciousness. So if I love and accept you just as you are right now, and right now is just perfect, why do anything at all? Now, the deal is you can't help but do. And we have to add a little caveat in there so that things become crystal clear. What we're talking about is that every experience, no matter what's happening right now, is absolutely perfect in what it's offering you. As it's already occurred, its necessity is given. Its perfection is given. But the perfection applies to its offering you everything that you need in that moment to do what? To fulfill your only purpose in being here. And that is to awaken fully to yourself. Now, you may say to yourself, well, I awake every morning, at dawn or when the alarm goes off, and I go to the mirror, and there I am. I awaken to myself. No. You're like a dreamer within a dream. You awaken to the illusion that which you see in the mirror and that which you think you are is yourself. Now, there's nothing wrong with having a self, even if it's the little s self. And time again, I've seen people totally misunderstand this. Your ego isn't there to be destroyed. It's not about destroying ego. It really isn't. Ego is a very powerful tool, a necessary tool. But until it's no longer behaving like a tool, will it truly become the tool that it's supposed to be, which incidentally means that it won't be behaving like a tool anymore, but it will be a tool again. And we use this all the time. We use our ego all the time. The difference is we have to kick it back out of the driver's seat. So that belittling in some way is the source of all your suffering. It's the source of it all. I know that can be really hard to take, but I want you to pay very close attention to this. And believe it or not, I'm saying this because I want to offer you the shortest, quickest, straightest, truest path to freedom from suffering. It's you. That's the problem. And since there are no problems, you're actually a puzzle. But it's you. The source of your suffering is 100% you. Now, I'm going to give you an example so we can be clear about this, and we're going to have a few examples, but here's the obvious one we need to address. So I take a physical baseball bat and I whack Kelly over the head with it. Well, I am causing her pain. That's from outside of herself. She didn't cause herself that pain. She's not responsible for that pain. She didn't bring that pain upon herself. But her response will determine her suffering in relation to the pain of getting whacked over the head with a baseball bat. Not the metaphysical one, but a real wooden one. So if someone's causing you physical pain, i.e. either beating you up or whatever the case may be, granted, you don't have control over that. That's not what that's about. But you still have control over whether or not you're going to suffer. And suffering always has to do with your point of view. It doesn't exist outside yourself. This is an incredibly difficult thing for so many people to grasp, and quite honestly, both Kelly and I have been through this with a few members in the recent past here, where the most loving, caring thing is basically to look them straight in the digital eye through the screen and say, "This is on you. There's nobody else to hold responsible or accountable. Just you." Now, why do we have such a problem with this? Well, the reason we do is the egoic sense of self is very much tied to whatever it is that it perceives it's experiencing. It's all designed to self-inflate. Ego literally has a built-in pump to make sure it stays nice and full. And this pump is activated anytime there's a perception of a threat to the ego or the egoic sense of self. And that doesn't matter whether it's belief systems, it doesn't matter whether it's the perceptions that others may hold of us, whatever the case may be, we own it. It's not beyond your control. You're the only one who has control of it. And as a matter of fact, it's one of the very few things that you have any control of in this physical world. And that is what you choose to think about the experiences you're having. And realistically, believe it or not, it's not even really you who's honestly having the experience. You're really just commenting on it. That egoic sense of self is literally like a little being sitting on your shoulder thinking it's the one, whereas there is a much larger and grander being smiling at that little egoic self, saying nothing, allowing that little egoic self to have its way. Why? Because free will exists. And the large being that you are, the truth of what you are, knows better. But that little sense of self doesn't. So, how do you free yourself from suffering when yourself is the puzzle? That point of view, that perception. So, the first thing to ask yourself is whether or not having that perception is feeling good to you. Are you enjoying perceiving that experience or that event or that past circumstance in the way you've been choosing to perceive it, consciously or unconsciously? does it feel good? If it doesn't feel good, the first question you need to ask yourself after that question is, why would I want to hold a perception that makes me feel bad? And there's always only just one answer, because that's tied into my sense of self. It's usually the victim mentality. And people who carry around the victim mentality consciously or unconsciously end up becoming victims. Why? Because life always says, as you wish. If you want to experience being a victim, well, here you go. Be a victim. And life will continue to make you a victim until you finally realize that the only way out of victimhood is to stop perceiving yourself as a victim. There's nothing outside of yourself that will ever change that. It's only you. You know, and I've used this example at some time in the past as well, but when Mandela was put in jail, rather than rail against the jail guards and spew hate and vitriol for them participating in wrongly imprisoning them, he treated them with dignity and respect and care. And over the course of time, he literally won them over. And he did it by choosing to perceive in a certain way, as opposed to choosing to perceive as a damaged being, as someone doing something against you. Even though he was imprisoned inside of four walls, he was still free. Free in the only way that ultimately we are free. The ability to choose what to perceive and how to perceive it. To make the choice for our own sake. You know, we often think we do things for others, but in truth, there is no other to do anything for. When you do something, you reap the benefit first and foremost. When you do that thing for another, it is you who is immediately fulfilled. This outpouring of ourselves for another is part of letting go of your point of view. The willingness to stop making life about you, even though, paradoxically, all of existence is about you. Right here, right now. What are you going to choose? How are you going to perceive? Now, if you're suffering and it's in a relationship where you feel the other person isn't behaving in the way you think they should, or isn't doing the things that you think they should be, or they promise they would, or whatever the case may be, you can't blame them for any of that. They're entitled to do what they want, even if you don't like it. That's part and parcel of that free will. You don't want your free will taken from you. Don't try to take it from another. What makes people angry in relationships is their own fear at making the choices that they know they need to make, but are too afraid to make. That fear of the unknown is greater than what they perceive is happening right in the relationship right now. So the dysfunction starts. In any relationship, each component of that relationship is entitled to its free will and its own choices. And if those choices don't match with your choices, that's on you to decide for you. But you can't hold the other person responsible. All of suffering exists within us. It is a mind creation. And again, I want to make this crystal clear. We're not talking about physical pain, but what you happen to think about that pain is suffering. What you happen to think about what's happened to you or is happening to you is suffering, if you choose to allow it to be. If you're feeling, there's another form of suffering we have to address here too, and that is the suffering that we go through when we're holding a grudge or holding anger against another. And it's not against them. That anger or grudge tears us apart inside, disrupts our harmonious vibrational state, causes dysfunction within our energy field. Again, it's a choice. Always life is looking at you and nobody else and saying, what do you choose right now in this moment for you? Life doesn't say, well, we know how so-and-so behaved, so, go ahead and make a choice and don't feel bad if it's not a good one. It's not about good choices or bad choices. It's about our awakening consciousness, our evolution of being, the purpose for our existence here. And the future is far more grand than you can possibly imagine. But let's just say that you truly need to become a fully conscious, fully responsible creator. And to do so, one of the very first steps is understanding that, as with everything else, only you can create suffering and only you can end suffering within yourself. Namaste to you this evening. Much love. Have a beautiful Wednesday night. We'll get back together again in a few days. Until then, take care.